Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, episode number 149 of Let's Go Racing. Tyler Jones here with you. Dominic Aragon here with us as well, as we'll look back at the weekend that was with Christopher Bell claiming the win in New Hampshire this past weekend with the rain and everything in between. We will recap it, talk about it all coming up in just a matter of moments. Also, we'll look ahead at this weekend's race at Nashville. I'll be there this weekend, one of my favorite races of the NASCAR Cup Series calendar, and it is going to be a show, folks. Cannot wait to see what the stars of the NASCAR Cup Series put together in what has become a destination race of the NASCAR season. We'll break it down coming up in just a little while from right now. Also, we'll have our news and notes, the latest headlines in the sport, as not only Martin Truex Jr. has retired, but his replacement already been named. Shout out Christopher Bell for that, as we are going to see none other than Chase Briscoe take the reins of the 19 car. We'll talk about that and also the other implications that come of that and more coming up in just a little while from right now. Also, what's going on with the 21 car. Haas now with Stewart Haas Racing going away, but Geno Haas sticking around. We'll dive into that. We'll also get our mailbag segment coming up at the end of today's show. He is back after leaving me hanging last week. Dominic Aragon is back in the building. Dominic, how we doing, my friend?
Hey, not one of my finer moments last week, but great to be back with you this week, Tyler. And yeah, a lot to unpack. And I got to catch a little bit about you and Lewis holding down the fort last week. And man, Lewis is quite the character. I will say that. I'm sure he's listening this week too. He's a friend of the show, and man, Lewis always has some really good stories. He definitely does. He doesn't hold back, Tyler. I love that about Lewis.
Oh, yeah. We love Lewis. Lewis was great last week. If you missed last week's show with Lewis Frank, I encourage you to check that out. Dominic, let's start with none other than Christopher Bell winning the race at New Hampshire. And I'll say this, Christopher Bell, very worthy win. He was really good there down the stretch. He has been the king of New Hampshire, swept the weekend. He's won a lot of races there over the years. But this was a totally different race when they decided to bring out the rain tires and go forward from there, as Kyle Larson in particular, who was one of the favorites and had run well all day, just fell apart. That 5 team really struggled with the rain tires there. What'd you make, before we talk about Christopher Bell and his win, what'd you make of NASCAR's decision to go forward with finishing this race, with getting every lap in and going with the rain tires? I think ultimately it was the right call. It wasn't necessarily the best racing per se, but you accomplished your mission of finishing the race. Do you agree? Was that the right call by NASCAR to go with the rain tires and finish the race?
I got to agree with you, Tyler. And we were talking about it a few weeks ago on the show about the calls of the Coke 600 and this weird box that NASCAR got put into, and certainly some interesting and unusual circumstances this week too, with New Hampshire being one of the few tracks without lights. So you're on this crunch for time to try and get this race in. Yeah, smaller track, you could ride off a little quicker than you could Charlotte. But I got to give NASCAR credit again, Tyler, when you can sit there and wait out the rain and have every excuse in the book to just call the race as is and not do that, and actually go out and make sure the race gets through and run the distance plus a little bit of overtime with how that race ended up finishing. I got to give NASCAR a good call on that, with being able to do that. We want fans to see the races go the full distance and maybe a little bit more if that's warranted, like we did with an overtime finish. And I think NASCAR really should be patting themselves on the back too. And Tyler, there was certainly a little, of course, you're not going to make everybody happy. And some of the controversy surrounding that too. Well, okay, NASCAR wasn't letting these guys put fuel, or they had to put in fuel in the car. And then they were designated pit stops and this sort of thing. So on one hand, I think Bob Pockris, friend of the show as well, had said on Twitter that maybe it was a decision that NASCAR was doing these things so they could have more like of a controlled thing for data, so they could get this data back. And again, uncharted territory, you have NASCAR running rain tires on an oval for the first time. So maybe they wanted to have all that data good. But I do get the argument too on the other side of that too, Tyler, on the fact that This is the top level of stock car racing in the world. Why can't the professionals decide for themselves? Maybe there could have been a plethora of data to pick from on all that, on this variety of strategy. I feel like NASCAR potentially could have missed something there too on that hand by being able to get a little bit more of a sample. Well, this team ran X amount of laps on rain tires, but then they swapped and they could have broken it down a little bit more. But I get the other side of it too. What's your take on that end of it?
Yeah, I think you and I are both in agreement. They made the right call to finish the race with rain tires, but did they make the right call of how they chose to use the tires is a different story. I don't know enough about tires, to be frank with you. If it would have been okay or not to put the slicks out there. I think Steve Letarte on the broadcast said that there was no way they could put the slicks back out there, in his opinion, based on what he had seen, which was contrary to what the 5 team, what Cliff Daniels and Kyle Larson felt from their end of things. But nonetheless, I point to this down. Maybe this isn't a perfect example, but it's the closest I can come up with. This, as you mentioned, first time NASCAR's ever run rain tires on an oval with no data to choose from. This would be like the equivalent, I think, Dom, of taking a tire on a dry day that's never been used before, and you've never raced that type of tire, and going out there and seeing what it's worth. I mean, there was no data to fly off of. They were experimenting as they go here. They're just lucky that there wasn't a ton more accidents, that no one was hurt, and that there wasn't terrible racing out of it. Because, in all honesty, I know it necessarily wasn't the prettiest 100 laps, but it could have gone a whole lot worse than what it did.
Do you imagine had they gone back racing and they waited out this 2-hour delay and there would have been a 15-car pileup in turn one? Because that was on the back of my mind. And I'm sure that was on the back of the minds of crew chiefs and team members and the drivers themselves. I think somebody had asked Ryan Blaney during the delay, if we go back racing, what can we expect from rain tires? And he kind of like laughed and gave like, well, I have no idea kind of answer. Like kind of like, duh, I have no idea. I've never done this kind of deal.
Well,
that's kind of what I got.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Tom. Correct me if I'm wrong. Wasn't New Hampshire where Adam Petty died?
Yes, Adam Petty passed away there with his crash. And gosh, was it Kenny Irwin as well? They had a crash there too in 2000, both in the same year, both on different race weekends. But yes, I think I didn't even think of that, Tyler. That might have been on the back of the minds of other people too. And I'm not saying Blaney, I'm not calling Blaney out and saying maybe he was thinking the reporter was asking a dumb question, but I think it was just one of those raw reactions. Like, I really don't know what to expect on this. We're all going to find this out together.
Yes. And I think it went pretty solid for NASCAR. If they had to do it over again, they probably would have done the exact same thing that they did with the call they made to go with that. And I'll say this, credit to NASCAR, credit to Goodyear, step in the right direction. I think we're going to see more of this, Dom, of these rain tire situations on ovals going forward. This was a step in the right direction. Obviously, you can't do this at 1.5-mile tracks right now. You're not going to be doing this at Texas Motor Speedway or Lowe's Motor Speedway or Homestead, but places like Martinsville, Phoenix, Bristol, others, this is not going away.
No, I don't think so. Now, let's play a hypothetical here. Based on what we saw, NASCAR liking this? Did NASCAR do we have enough data to go forward? Like if we were in a situation in Phoenix in November, because it does rain in the desert, and we have seen that race impacted by rain, the November Phoenix race, could they call this and have them run rain tires at Phoenix for the championship race? I mean, I know we're going extreme here, at least I am, Tyler, but these are questions that are now starting to pop in my head as NASCAR looks down the road. Number one, are they satisfied with what they saw? Number two, could we see this in a playoff race, let alone a championship race?
Yes, because I think you still rather run the rain tires than finish on Monday. Or the other scenario, you rather run rain tires than have to call a championship race early that has gone halfway. You would hate to see rain be what decides the championship. I think rain tires are your best solution there.
Yeah, and it's better than nothing. And it's NASCAR exercising and flexing the options that it has on the table. It's better than, well, hey, we're just throwing in the towel. We'll try back for the next day. We all want to see these races get run the same day. In a perfect world, we wouldn't have weather factoring to any of these races. We would have had Daytona running on a Sunday this year, Tyler. We would have had Kyle Larson running the double, but just, I don't know. There's so many factors out of our control, but NASCAR is trying to put some of that control back into their hands. And I got to give them credit for trying things. I will never fault anybody or any organization that's trying things and trying to make things better. And it may not be perceived that way by everybody. And some things may backfire, but how can you do things if you don't even try in the first place? So I got to give NASCAR credit overall on the situation. Perfect execution? Absolutely not. But can you give somebody kudos for trying something? Absolutely.
All right, let's talk about Christopher Bell now. Getting his third win of the year, tied for the most in all of the NASCAR Cup Series. And here he is. We've seen Christopher Bell in the Championship 4 in the past, but now this feels like another level, Dom, where he is a threat week in and week out, which we haven't said before about Christopher Bell. He's, kind of had his peaks and valleys, right? Now, every single week, Christopher Bell of that 20 car, they are a threat to get into victory lane. The consistency is showing it to an extent. Dom, kind of reminds me of what we saw from William Byron last year in the 24 car, where the 24 car had a breakthrough year and you had to consider them a contender every single week last year. I think Christopher Bell, I don't want to call it a breakout because he's already had a breakout campaign, but he's taken the next step where he looks like a true championship contender. They dominated. They were all on the same page on Sunday there in New Hampshire.
No, certainly. You said what I was thinking about a William Byron-esque kind of year, because Byron had that big breakthrough year last year. Well, and I don't think you're out of bounds in saying that, because Christopher Bell has made 2 Championship 4 appearances, but they've been sporadic regular seasons where we see Christopher Bell get hot in the playoffs. Christopher Bell is hot in the regular season. And this is very important because we talked about this time. I still think I picked William Byron at the beginning of the year. I still think Byron comes out as champion, but William Byron's not picking up stage points. Denny Hamlin is throughout this regular season campaign. Same as Christopher Bell. Guys that are these points are going to help these guys advance through the rounds as we get through those rounds, the round of 8, the round of 12, etc. They're picking up points where it really, really is important to do that right now. You're going to be in the playoffs, but how can you give yourself a better footing? Christopher Bell and that 20 team are just hitting their marks. Adam Stevens is an amazing crew chief. He is a championship crew chief, 2-time champ with Kyle Busch in 15-19, and he has picked up where he left off with Kyle Busch. And Christopher Bell, certainly one of these drivers destined for greatness. And he's 29, Tyler. He's young. He's very, very young. Joe Gibbs Racing has their driver for the next 10 years if Bell chooses to exercise that. And we're looking at, I would say, Tyler, I draw comparisons to Carl Edwards and the fact that Christopher Bell and Carl Edwards, not necessarily the big social media guys, they just wanted to get in a race car and race and be known for being a race car driver, as do most of these guys at that level. But there's just something about that. I think there's some parallels between Christopher Bell, Carl Edwards, those ultra consistent drivers, great across all 3 series. We're just getting started with the greatness we're seeing. One more win, Tyler, and Christopher Bell strikes double-digit wins in the Cup Series, and you really start talking about tying some of these all-time drivers in the Cup Series and some really heavy-hitting names.
Yeah, I mean, Dom, let's talk big picture when it comes to Christopher Bell. We mentioned this being the 3rd win of his career and how big of of the season, rather, how big of a deal it is that they're showing performance week in and week out. If we're to look into the future, what do you think of Christopher Bell? What can he accomplish? Right now, Dom, you mentioned he's 29 years old. I don't see any reason at this point in time, him still being very young, just now really entering his prime with an elite team at Joe Gibbs Racing. Martin Truex is about to be out the door. We don't know how much longer Denny Hamlin's going to be there. I mean, he's going to be the guy at Joe Gibbs Racing, if not now, very, very soon. I have no reason to think, Dom, that Christopher Bell can't win multiple championships at Joe Gibbs Racing. Do you agree? What do you think about his long-term future?
I don't disagree with that. And I think what's going to feel that even more, if you recall, when he first joined Joe Gibbs Racing, he was in the Xfinity program. And he ran the Kyle Busch Motorsports Truck Series banner, won Truck Series title there. They kept him in Xfinity in 2019. And I remember him making some comments that he was not happy about that he was wasting another year of his prime not running in the Cup Series. And he runs at Levine Family Racing in 2020. Tyler, I'm going to say an even step higher to this. I feel like those 2 years, those formation years, not even getting to run a Cup race till 2020, and then moving over to Gibbs in 2021, I got to feel like Christopher Bell has that in the back of his mind frequently, that might be a little bit of a chip on his shoulder. Like, you know what? I got robbed of these 2 years, but I'm still going to make the most of this. And
well, remember this too.
As I can.
Remember this too, Dom. The guy he replaced, Eric Jones, was actually younger than him.
Exactly. So Joe Gibbs definitely saw something in Christopher Bell that maybe he didn't see in Eric Jones. And I remember Jones being a little salty about that. Who wouldn't? You're being replaced by somebody who's not even younger, who's older. But Christopher Bell, I think those 2 years that he might have missed out in Cup, I feel like he drives with that little bit of a chip on his shoulder, and he's one of the cleanest racers. I think you talk to any of the competitors in the Cup Series, they would argue that Christopher Bell would be one of your cleaner competitors. He's going to race you hard. He's going to race you clean. We don't hear about Christopher Bell making aggressive moves and wrecking drivers. He's up front. He's methodical in how he works his way to the front of these races. And to circle back to your original question, I think when we're talking 10 years from now, Tyler, I'd be shocked to not think Christopher Bell is at least a one-time champion in the Cup Series, 25 to 30 Cup Series wins, if not more, multi-win seasons. It's not out of bounds to think Christopher Bell can win 2 to 3 races a year. We're halfway now at 18 races in 2024. And Christopher Bell has 3 wins. He's already matched the most he's ever had in 1 year. He did that in 2022. So Christopher Bell, man, I think we're just getting started on what we're seeing. Him and Ty Gibbs look like they're the immediate future for Joe Gibbs Racing. And of course, we got to talk about Chase Briscoe, which we will later on. But Bell seems to be like that guy that will be stepping up in that leadership role.
Yeah, certainly so. Watch out for Christopher Bell. I got to tell you, as a guy from Oklahoma, I'm so excited to see him running at a high level. He's already the greatest NASCAR driver to ever come out of Oklahoma. He's a Chili Bowl champion, which obviously is the biggest race in my home state there. He'll be in the Oklahoma Hall of Fame in no time. He'll be in the NASCAR Hall of Fame someday too. I'm very high on Christopher Bell as far as that goes. Let's take a look at the point standings now, Dom. Here is the playoff picture as we're down to 8 races to go in the regular season. Larson, Elliott, Hamlin, Reddick, Bell, Byron, Blaney, and Keselowski with wins. They are all in, as is Daniel Suarez and Austin Cindric. Then you go to the points. Martin Truex is 155 above the cutoff. He does not have a win, but he seems to be in good shape in points. Ross Chastain doesn't have a win, but he's 93 above. He's in good shape. Ty Gibbs doesn't have a win, but he's 82 above. Then things start to get interesting. Alex Bowman, 52 above the cutoff. Chris Buescher, 50 ahead of the cutoff. Joey Logano, 13 ahead of the cutoff. And then on the outside looking in, Bubba Wallace, minus 13. Chase Briscoe, minus 25. Kyle Busch, minus 45. Josh Berry, minus 73. When I look at the points, Dom, the big takeaway for me is Joey Logano and Kyle Busch, 2 former champions. Joey Logano sitting on the verge right now. I would think that he's going to get to victory lane sooner than later. Penske's look better. But Kyle Busch, RCR is not doing so hot. Andy Petrie just retired unexpectedly in the middle of the season, their competition director, which sounds a little sus, as the kids say.
Yes.
To say the least, with that situation. And they're 45 points out. Right now, I think Joey wins and gets a playoff spot. But if I were to guess right now, Dom, I don't think Kyle Busch gets to victory lane, gets a playoff spot. Maybe they figure it out, but they do not look like a playoff team right now. What's kind of your thoughts in the playoff picture at the moment?
And you know what's even more sus about that, Tyler? Wasn't Kyle Busch, and this is a rhetorical question, wasn't Kyle Busch the points leader like after Atlanta or Las Vegas? And that 8 team looked like they just picked up where they had left off in 2023. And It's been a tale of 2 seasons. The last 4 weeks, mechanical issues, crashes. he got wrecked at Sonoma. He was fourth or fifth, I think, Tyler. You might remember that a little better than me, but he got spun by Ross Chastain on the last lap. He got wrecked with 2 laps to go in stage 2 at Gateway by Kyle Larson, and he was on the way to collect some stage points. They have just thrown away points the last 4 weeks, and I think that's the craziest to me, Tyler, is that Kyle Busch was the points leader. Brad Keselowski was the points leader after like the 4th or 5th race in 2013. They went on to miss the playoffs that year as the defending champion. And I remember last year we were so up on Randall Burnett and Kyle Busch and this move and the 3 wins. Tyler, I remember you picked Kyle Busch to be in your championship 4 last year. What a night and day difference from 8 months ago.
Yeah. Things have escalated quickly. And we heard Kyle Busch. Lewis and I talked about his comments last week of saying that if he could go to Gibbs or Hendrick right now, he would. I look at Andy Petrie stepping down. Andy Petrie, I thought, had done a pretty good job up until this year getting RCR back on track since he took over that operation. But things had not gone like they had thought. Randall Burnett looked like one of the better crew chiefs in the sport the last couple of years. But I'll say this, nothing against Andy Petrie. I think Andy Petrie is very good at what he does. He's probably going to go back and do some media, and, he's pretty good on TV. Andy Petrie is going to be fine. But whether it was at the expense of Andy Petrie or whatever it may be, change needed to happen there at RCR. They cannot be content with what they're putting on track and, consider themselves a playoff team, because all the other Chevy teams, Dom, are doing pretty good. Hendrick looks good. Trackhouse looks good. There's just no excuse for this effort from Kyle Busch and that A team, and same goes for Austin Dillon in the 3 car too.
Austin Dillon looks like trash this year. There's no way putting that around. Austin Dillon, at least the year he made the playoffs in 22 and won the race in Daytona, he was finishing top 10 in races. He had top 5 runs, collecting stage points. Might have even had a couple of stage wins. That 3 car has been non-existent. That 3 car is lucky to finish on the lead lap, it seems like, more often than not. And Kyle Busch, man, I don't know, RCR just is in this weird little rift. And maybe that's putting it lightly. But really, you and Colleague Racing are probably at the bottom of the barrel of the Chevrolet teams right now. I didn't see this coming, Tyler. That 8 team looks so good on the 1.5 miles. And they go to the short tracks, and they run like crap. It's a tale of 2 teams there, and just the setups. And Kyle Busch has said they've been off too on the short tracks, but the 1.5 mile program might be their saving grace. I do remember him muscling to the lead at Las Vegas and leading for about 20 laps. I know Kyle Larson won that day in March, but I felt like, wow, that 8 team is going to be a team to wreck with, or a force to be reckoned with, and just has not happened yet this year. But yeah, here's the bigger question on that, and we'll circle back to the playoffs too. Tyler, does Kyle Busch extend his NASCAR historic streak of getting at least 1 win per year? Because if he does that, he gets 20 wins. He already has the all-time record. Richard Petty had 18 wins. Kyle Busch, or 18 seasons with at least 1 win. Kyle Busch is at 19. Does that streak continue?
I lean towards no right now, but there's still plenty of time. And even if they can't figure out their 1.5 mile program or all that, obviously you could still compete on restrictor plates. That's a possibility. But right now I'd lean towards no, but we'll see what happens of that going forward. Let's look ahead to this weekend's race in Nashville. Dom, one of my favorite tracks. I've been there the last 2 years. I'm going this weekend for the 3rd straight time. This track's got everything, right? I mean, we've seen great racing over the last few years. The environment around the track is incredible. It feels like an SEC football game. You got, I think, the best city in America to travel to, Broadway and all its glory and everything with that. To me, it was a brilliant move by Dover Motorsports Group originally, in conjunction with NASCAR, to move one of the Dover races to Nashville. Obviously, SMI ended up buying Nashville, and they've kept this race there. They sell out every year. I mean, this was just a natural fit on the calendar. This has been one of the best things NASCAR's done in recent memory, is add this Nashville race. This has been great, a great product on and off the track.
Well, and every year you've tried to get me to go out there, and I will make it out there someday. I have been in the parking lot of that track, and I've been out there. It was weeks after the race weekend, but have never been there for a NASCAR race. Our great friend of the show, Steve Miller Band keyboard player Joseph Wooten, had even said how much fun that was. Not really necessarily being a NASCAR guy, but being at that inaugural race, getting to watch that with Bobby Allison. Every story, Tyler, that I hear come out of Nashville, whether it be an experience in the suites, in the pits, in the grandstands, the media, to the atmosphere in that city, in that part of the state, in that part of the country, I hear nothing but great and nothing but awesome times held during that NASCAR race weekend, Tyler. I could see why it is one of the most appealing races to go to. And like I said, it's on my short list. One of the very few NASCAR race weekends I've never been to, but I got to change that, Tyler. And I look forward to living vicariously through you this weekend. And with all of that said, I know you enjoy all those aspects of going to Nashville. For you, is there a favorite thing that you're looking forward to this weekend? Or how do you look at this as a perspective of a media member representing our podcast, to the nightlife and everything that all encompasses? What are all the things you're looking forward to?
Man, for me, it's just being in the city, being in Nashville. You know, I love Broadway. I'll be visiting Kid Rock's Honky Tonk and going to Jason Aldean's and going to Tootsie's and all that. And, you know, visiting my friends down the road at 6th and Peabody and all that. Like, you know, just day drinking and listening to live music on a Friday afternoon. You know, why not? Just an escape from the rest of the world. It is a great summer town, too. We talk about the Summer of Jones very often on this program. The Summer of Jones has been a staple of Let's Go Racing for the, you know, close to 150 plus episodes we've been on the air now. And I mean, I just thrive in that city, and NASCAR thrives in that city. This town embraces it. I mean, Dom, I'll say this much too. You go to different tracks around the country and you look around the city, and sometimes you'd have no idea there was a NASCAR race going on. And I hate to admit it, but the place I live, Dallas, Fort Worth, most people have no idea when there's a race going on at Texas Motor Speedway. You don't see hardly anything in Fort Worth or Dallas. I mean, that's just another thing going on. Despite being 30, 35 minutes away from downtown Nashville, out in the middle of the boonies and nowhere, everyone is fully aware when NASCAR comes to Nashville. They've embraced it. It's been a huge part of their culture. It's one of their biggest events the entire year Nashville puts on, and NASCAR fits right in to what Nashville is.
That makes a lot of sense. And NASCAR and Nashville have this long-standing history with the fairgrounds, now the super speedway, and even having
awards banquet.
The awards banquets now there. There's definitely a good stake in the ground with NASCAR in Nashville. And I got to say, too, even just from like the small details that are really cool. I think NASCAR, they definitely do it during the awards banquet time in the winter, but I want to say I've seen them do this at least once with NASCAR's social media team. They will change that Facebook profile picture to a guitar pick with the NASCAR logo like embedded in it. I think that is such a sweet touch. Again, something very, very small and subtle, yet really appreciate. And that shows you how much they appreciate Nashville.
Yeah, certainly. The race itself this weekend, we'll give our picks coming up later. But Dom, I'm very curious. The thing I'm watching for is those Fords. We've seen the Fords improve a lot over the last few weeks. We mentioned still waiting to see Joey Logano get into victory lane. RFK Racing's been strong. Penske's been strong. Stuart Haas been running better as of late. Josh Berry could have won this past week at Loudon. To me, that's the big thing that has my attention is, will the Fords continue on the right track, and can we see a Ford car get in victory lane? What are you watching for this weekend in Nashville?
Man, I'm looking to see if we're going to get our first repeat winner at the Nashville Super Speedway in the Cup Series. Granted, we've only had 3 races, but they've all been won by Chevrolet teams. So that'll be interesting to see if that Chevrolet trend continues. You had Larson in 21, Chase Elliott in 22, Ross Chastain last year. Does that Chevy dominance at Nashville continue? You bring up a great point with Ford, too, though, is Ford's looking a lot better, and the Ford camp just running stronger altogether. I think this is what we were all thinking we would have seen in February. Maybe they were a little – the horse was a little out of the gate, pun intended, a little later than I think most people had anticipated in 24. But it seems like we have an even balance now, at least that what we have seen the last few weeks, a more it could go any of the manufacturers. And I think this will be an interesting test of that because Nashville, correct me if I'm wrong, Tyler, it's not a 1.5 mile, but races like a 1.5 mile. And we've seen the Fords do well in qualifying, and track position be so important here at Nashville with pit selections and all of that. So if Ford can get really good in qualifying like we've seen them and get strong and hot there, I think it'll just create that nice, well-balanced race that we'll see on Sunday.
Yeah, 1.3 miles to be exact.
There we go, yes.
At Nashville Super Speedway. So we'll have our picks coming up later, but first, let's go ahead and get to the headlines of the sport, our news and notes. Dom, start us off with Chase Briscoe making the move to Joe Gibbs Racing.
Well, it seemed like his teammate just wanted to sidestep the whole thing there with going through formal press conferences and announcements, but officially making the news, and Joe Gibbs making right on the slip of the tongue from Christopher Bell. Joe Gibbs Racing announcing on Tuesday, June 25th, Chase Briscoe will be joining the team and replacing Martin Truex Jr. in the 19 car. Bass Pro Shops will be returning as a sponsor. We're going to see James Small still top the pit box, but Chase Briscoe making that jump. We know where one of the four Stewart Haas dominoes and drivers will fall going into 2025. But certainly news that was not necessarily a shock when you have Christopher Bell accidentally reveal that to the media a few days prior. I got to imagine, Tyler, behind the scenes, social media teams were scrambling. I'm sure Coach Gibbs probably wasn't too happy, but he did make a joke about it on Sunday that because somebody asked him, what do you think about Christopher doing this? Does winning help it? And he's like, hey, Christopher Bell can do whatever he wants. But I got to imagine, though, behind the scenes, Tyler, that had to have been a scramble for the entire organization, getting everything correct and the sponsorship announcements down to everything like that. But at the same time, Christopher Bell probably gave it more attention. So at the end of the day, the only people benefiting from this is Joe Gibbs Racing, Chase Briscoe, and all their partners.
Yeah, I honestly, I could care less about Christopher Bell and that announcement. That was funny. Let's talk about what's going on with Chase Briscoe making this move here. Listening to Chase Briscoe talking about it, Dom, I thought it was fascinating to hear him say that of all the teams he talked to, he mentioned he talked to Wood Brothers and Penske and others. Joe Gibbs Racing was the only one that did not ask him, what are you bringing to us? And on the flip side of that, Bass Pro is sticking around that 19 car, also staying as the 19, not renumbering to the 18. We won't see the 18 come back just yet. But I found that interesting, Dom, that Chase Briscoe is not having to bring in $1. Maybe, Rush Truck Centers or, Mahindra, whatever it's called, comes with him or something like that. But they're not asking for that. They already got Bass Pro there. But we know that Bass Pro is heavily involved in other teams like, Richard Childress Racing, Stewart Haas, and all that. But they're going to stay loyal to Joe Gibbs and everything there. To me, I thought that said a lot, that Joe Gibbs believes in Chase Briscoe's talent. This is not just about chasing the dollar. They see a guy, Chase Briscoe. I know he's only been to one playoff and only has one win, but he's a former Xfinity Series champion. They see something in Chase Briscoe that makes them believe that he can be a championship caliber driver. And you get him the top equipment there at Joe Gibbs Racing, like, we're going to find out pretty quick whether Chase Briscoe has it or not. He's not going to have, I would think, a short leash there at JGR now.
No, absolutely not. And I feel like this, to me, Tyler, has a lot of similarities with Martin Truex Jr.'s career, because Truex, for the longest time, one win to his name over his first 5-6 full-time years in the Cup Series, but continued to stay around. And it seemed like Michael Waltrip Racing was going to be the long-term plan until it wasn't. Chase Briscoe wanted to stay at Stewart Haas Racing, was driving for his favorite driver. It was a dream come true till it wasn't. So this whole thing blew up in everybody's faces a few weeks ago. So him joining the caliber kind of organization that he's joining, Tyler, I wouldn't be surprised. We're talking about Christopher Bell rattling off all these wins. Who's to say Chase Briscoe can't do the exact same thing in better equipment?
Yeah, I would be very curious. We're going to find out pretty fast when it comes to Chase Briscoe, whether he is the guy or not. And I'll say this, Dom, too, for better or for worse. We've seen it kind of bite them in the ass at times. Joe Gibbs does not have a lot of patience for his drivers. If Chase Briscoe does not figure it out, if he is not the right man for the job, then they're not afraid to move on from him pretty quick either.
Oh, absolutely not. No, Joe Gibbs, he's a multi-Super Bowl champion coach for a reason. He's very cutthroat, and I'm sure you'd have even more of those stories be able to rattle off than I would. But I've heard stories of him being rough as a head coach, and once he's done with you, he's done with you. And that mentality is carried over to his NASCAR team. And we saw how quickly he got rid of Matt Kenseth. We saw how quickly he got rid of Eric Jones. So Chase Briscoe,
Joey Logano,
another driver there too. You're right. So if Chase Briscoe is not in victory lane by that second year, gotta imagine Joe Gibbs can move on and pick somebody else, pull it from that Xfinity camp, somebody younger and somebody that has more raw talent. So Chase Briscoe, I don't want to say he's already on the hot seat, but you got more eyeballs on you. There's certainly gonna be a lot more pressure with that position.
All right, so let's continue with silly season. Stewart Haas, not completely going away just yet, as the Haas brand going to stick around. Dom, I have some questions for you that I need answered, but first, kind of explain this situation.
So great, yeah, no worries. Geno Haas, one of the co-owner with Stewart Haas, Tony Stewart Haas Racing in the Cup Series, will not leave the sport, and they will retain one of the 4 charters. So we know that Front Row Motorsports is getting one of the charters. 2311 was rumored to have that as well. But the sale of all these charters is not going completely away. They're going to still run one car out of that Stewart Haas camp where they're currently at, I believe in Mooresville. Then the Xfinity team's still going to stay there too. But on the Cup side, Tyler, we have one charter team. So we know that Haas wants to continue this team on. And he did that for years, from, I believe, 2001 to 2008. He ran his Haas CNC Racing. And he did say, I believe it was in a Sirius XM radio interview last week, that he needs that Haas CNC branding on race cars. So it's his company, his machinery company. He still wants to have that with a presence on the racetrack.
So here's my question, Dom. I got 2 questions for you. Here's the first one.
Throw me all the questions, Tyler.
When we look at this situation, you had the announcement, what was it, 3-4 weeks after Stewart Haas announced they were shutting down. Do we think that Gene Haas changed his mind and said, wait a second, I'm not ready to leave. I'm going to keep a charter and I'm going to keep marching on? Or was this the plan all along? Because you're keeping the shop open. You're keeping people employed here. Why did you scare the hell out of all these employees that they needed to go find work and say you were shutting down when you weren't really shutting down? They're partially shutting down, but I mean, that's what I wonder. Do you think Gene changed his mind that, oh, wait, you know what? I want to keep one of these charters, keep the Xfinity team, or was this the plan all along? Because you scared, pardon my French, the shit out of a lot of people within the last few weeks of how they handled this. I thought this was poorly handled right here.
Certainly. It makes you wonder that, Tyler, as a complete outsider trying to look on the inside on this situation. I feel like there might have been maybe one of those, well, I don't know if buyer's remorse is the right term for it, but one of those regretted decisions like, oh, you know what, we said we're not going to be back. Maybe I could keep one. Because I remember Adam Stern, the Sports Business Journal, friend of the show, was saying on Twitter that Stewart Haas Racing was putting all of these packages together to sell off the entire operation. I wonder if a little bit of guilt got to Gene Haas, or maybe people in his inner circle said, well, maybe you might want to hold on to at least one charter.
So you do think, so Dom, you think he changed his mind that this wasn't the original plan?
I do. I feel like it was going to be an entire package deal. Because remember, too, Front Row Motorsports was looking at purchasing that entire facility. It would have been pretty much the Front Row Motorsports was the old Stewart Haas Racing type thing, but that's not going to happen now. I really feel like Gene Haas had a change of tune, a change of course, and whatever caused that reason, I don't know at this time. Maybe that comes out later, but I like that idea, Tyler, that, you know what? Maybe there isn't greener pastures by selling all 4 charters. Let me hang on to one. And the dude's got more money than most. So money's not an issue. He can bankroll this operation. He clearly sounds like he wants to anyway with his Haas CNC branding on the vehicles.
So here's my other question. How competitive do we realistically think they can be? Because The last time Gene Haas did this on his own, it was awful. And that's why he brought in Tony Stewart, and they had success pretty much immediately. They got better drivers, better equipment, better personnel involved when Tony Stewart came on board, and they won a championship pretty quick. Won two championships, actually, one with Tony and one with Kevin Harvick. And we've seen what's gone on at Stewart Haas the last couple of years, that team has fallen apart, that they haven't been what they once were. And then on top of that, too, Gene has his F1 team, which is arguably the worst team in F1. They stink. I mean, they're bad. It's awful. Gunther Steiner was running that operation and did a horrible job. I love Gunther Steiner, but he had no idea what he was doing with that F1 operation there that Haas had. And you think about it, too. He says, well, I got to use it to promote my businesses and all this. Gene, what is it? Are you interested in winning, or are you just trying to use this as a tax write-off and promote your businesses and run crap cars out there? That's what I am concerned with. I am not getting my hopes up, Dom, that this Team Haas team, whatever it is going to be worth a damn.
No disrespect to these guys, Tyler, because they were still pretty good. Just maybe the equipment wasn't there. Think Mike Bliss, Jeff Green, Johnny Sauter, Jason Loeffler, Jeremy Mayfield, when all those guys were running those 66, 70 cars, Scott Riggs. Did we ever see Haas cars up front? No, we saw those Haas guys between 25th to 35th place on the racetrack more often than not. And Gene never went to victory lane all by himself. I got to imagine there's a regression overnight into 2025. And it's one of those deals, too, where do you put a full-time guy in? We know that Cole Custer's father, Joe Custer, is going to still be a part of the organization, still help kind of manage all the day-to-day stuff. But we know Tony and Gene have been very hands-off owners, and they have been very vocal in saying that they've been hands-off over the years and have a different approach. I got to imagine, Tyler, we're going to see somebody, maybe they bring in a driver who's willing to take that chance, maybe somebody in Xfinity who, and not even a part of the Stewart Haas organization right now, that could run that car, maybe bring a little bit of funding, maybe not, that's just willing to do that because they still want to race. Or like we saw with colleague racing, and that turns into like an all-star car where you have a rotation of drivers. I don't know, Taylor, but I feel like what we're seeing right now, we're seeing Chase Briscoe, Josh Berry, a lot of these guys run top 10 every week. I'd be willing to bet money if I was a gambling man that we're not going to see that Haas factory team car running how they're running currently.
Yeah, I am not optimistic. What about the driver for that team? We saw that Cole Custer's dad, Joe Custer, is going to be the team president. I have to think that Cole's going to be around in some capacity, whether it's that Cup car or back in Xfinity, one way or the other. But if I'm Gene Haas, Dom, I would be doing whatever it takes, move heaven and earth, to keep the 4 car with Josh Berry and Rodney Childress. You already lost Chase Briscoe. I know you got Noah Gragson there, and company, and obviously you have Ryan Preece. Ryan Preece hasn't done that great. Noah's looked pretty solid, but I think of those 3, really 4. Let's add Cole Custer to the mix, maybe even 5. You say Riley Hurst too. I think Josh is by far the best. I would do, if I were Gene, I'd be trying to keep Josh Berry and Rodney together. But realistically, if you're Josh and Rodney, you're probably going to have better options than staying at this Haas team organization.
You're not wrong. And let's be honest, we know it's not going to be a competitive car. And we could be proven wrong. Stranger things have happened. But I just don't see that happening. I think all the signs point to this car just being a field filler, for lack of better terms. And somebody like a Cole Custer, I think, would be a leading candidate right now. We know Cole would like to get back to the Cup Series, and Gene was more in Cole's corner, while Tony Stewart was more in Ryan Preece's corner to replace Cole Custer. So I feel like Gene having that final call, maybe Cole Custer's the Haas factory driver in 2025, maybe Riley Herbst, but if they're just wanting the Haas branding on it, they're already doing that with Cole Custer and Xfinity. Who's not to say they just pull that up to the Cup. I could be wrong. They could be looking at other people. I feel like Cole Custer is the leading candidate for that car right now, and that Josh Berry, Rodney Childers would be a package deal to go somewhere else. It sounds like Rodney wants to continue high with Josh, riding high with Josh Berry, and he's really, really up on Josh. I think there's a good future there with those two.
Yeah, I think so. I think you're right about that. Um, Also, kind of the revelations that we found out through all this silly season free agency. It looks like the 21 car is open. Briscoe was the favorite. Where are we headed with all that? What's going on with the Wood brothers here, Dom?
Well, one of the sources I had talked with, it seemed like possibly Josh Berry and Rodney Childers could head over to the 21 team. I don't know if talks have gone better on that, but that's really the only thing, at least in my corner, that I've really heard of anything substance that possibly Harrison Burton. Well, we know Harrison Burton's going to be out, but having Josh Berry and Rodney Childers go and work with that 21 team, that Berry, I guess, has already spoken with Wood Brothers. To what extent and how all that looks, I have no idea. But I got to imagine Josh Berry and company are probably looking at that ride as maybe the next best option. Front Row Motorsports having another charter too, maybe staying in the Ford camp could be an opportunity. Could you imagine, Tyler, if Rodney Childers, Josh Berry head on over to Front Row Motorsports, how much of a turnaround that'd be even more so for that organization? We know that 34 team, the 38 team, Todd Gilliland is the clear front runner now and the face of that organization, but they keep making strides every year. How much even bigger leaps you could make with the Rodney Childers helping with that organization?
Yeah, I think you're on to something there. And you know, the idea that the 21 car is fascinating too, because we've seen Dom really up until Harrison Burton, everybody that stepped in that 21 car in the Penske era was doing really good. Ryan Blaney won races, went to the playoff. Matt DiBenedetto came very close to winning races and was running up front. And he made
Paul
a play
Menard.
in that car. Um, like Josh Berry feels like a guy that could come right in right away and get that 21 car in victory lane and get them in the playoff. And with the Penske support they have, like that 21 team, there's no reason why they can't compete if they get the right car, if they get the right driver and crew chief.
And looking at that opportunity, I feel like with Chase Briscoe out of the picture, your next best option would probably be a Josh Berry for that organization. I don't know, man. There's just so many options, so many different ways we could go about this. And maybe somebody from Xfinity pulls up too, because gotta imagine too, you're Chandler Smith, you're looking at the Cup Series. You want to get back to the Cup Series. You ran one or two races with colleague racing, but you're not going to get that opportunity. Chase Briscoe just closed that up in the 19 team. So maybe somebody that we're not even thinking right now could just unpluck and just make silly season even that much more of a scramble. But it already has. And Tyler, I got to say, this has been one of the crazier silly seasons I could think of in some time. Like that year that Furniture Row Racing shut down in 2018 was a wild one. But a lot of crazy stuff happening this year already.
Yeah, certainly, certainly. So, Dom, what else we got going on here?
So ahead to this weekend, looking at the Nashville Super Speedway race that you're going to be at, we have the odds for the Ally 400, opening odds for this NASCAR's race weekend. Of course, Tyler, I have to ask you, it's been a fun theme doing this the last few weeks. Who do you think are the odds-on favorites? Tyler's not looked at these just yet, by the way, everyone. But if you had to pick, who do you think is the odds-on favorite, and what are their odds?
Ooh, I would guess Denny Hamlin, and Kyle Larson, probably your two favorites. Probably I'll go Larson, the top favorite, plus 500, Hamlin plus 600.
You're very close, man. I'm pretty much reading from my script. Kyle Larson is the odds-on favorite, the early opening odds favorite for Sunday's race at plus 425. Denny Hamlin at plus
Ooh, okay.
550. Christopher Bell, last week's winner, at plus 600. Martin Truex Jr., along with last year in defending race winner Ross Chastain,
I
sitting at
was
plus
pretty close
750.
then. Okay.
Yeah, I got to give you credit there. So you can tell you do your research. You know how these things work.
I
So
know
really cool
betting.
to,
And we
yeah,
can bet in Tennessee legally this weekend.
there you go. There you go. So I think we know we're going to find Tyler at some sort of sports book, and we'll hear about that next week. Chase Elliott at plus 800. William Byron, who has 3 wins this year, at plus 900. Your defending series champion, Ryan Blaney, at plus 1,000 or 10 to 1. Tyler Reddick, also at 10 to 1, plus 1,000. Joey Logano, 18 to 1. Keselowski, 22 to 1. Ty Gibbs, who has yet to find victory lane, at 25 to 1. Kyle Busch, 35 to 1. Some of your long shots here include Michael McDowell at, that would be plus 11,000 or 110 to 1. And then your really long shots here, Harrison Burton at plus 50,000, Zane Smith, Riley Herbst, Daniel Hamrick, and Chad Fincham all at plus 100,000 or 1,000 to 1.
I'm getting my long shot bet in on Chad Fincham here. Going to really cash out on that one, as far as that goes. My pick this week, I'm going with Kyle Larson. I know it sounds easy, but he's got something figured out. I would think, granted, I'm not a crew chief. We discussed what things I am not already earlier in this show. I'll add crew chief to that. I'm not a tire guy, and I'm not a crew chief. But I would think, Dom, they'll probably bring a similar setup to what we saw at Kansas a few weeks ago, as that 5 car was cooking. And they were cooking at Texas before he had that speeding penalty. Probably would have won that race, too. Kyle Larson, I think it's going to be tough to beat on Sunday.
Yeah, not hard to root against that. And Kyle Larson looking strong at all these types of tracks. There's a reason he's the odds-on favorite for opening odds. I think that's a really solid pick. And you know what, Tyler? I got to lock that in and agree with you. I think Kyle Larson gets the win. He won this race in 21. I think we see our first repeat Nashville Superspeedway Cup Series winner, and that will be, of course, Kyle Larson making that happen.
There you go. All right. Before we go, our mailbag segment this week, with Dom and I just here, that allows us the opportunity to ask each other questions and get to know each other even further. And you can submit questions to us by email, davidstarrpodcast@gmail.com, on X at Starr Podcast, also Facebook.com/Starr Podcast. So, Dom, my question to you, I'm going to give you a softball question here. Not about the sport of softball, just an easy softball question. You were out from the show last week, and I won't scold you for it. I'll save that off the air, which I have. But tell us, what were you doing last week? What would you do with your week off? Where'd you go for this vacation here?
Sure. So one of those where it wasn't meant to be one of those week offs, and any of you know me, I'm horrible with my phone, and I don't mean to be. I'll see messages and I'll get back to that person later, and I don't. And I did that to Tyler. I'll scold myself. I'll get ahead of the game there and drop the ball last week. But we were in upstate New York for part of that trip, and we went out there. Actually, the main purpose of it was to go to Connecticut, East Haven, near Tarrytown, and Sleepy Hollow, those places. We have some family that we had connected with over the last few years from my mother's side. So really cool to go to a high school graduation, see family that we hadn't seen in a couple of years. And of course, we had a few days for some downtime. And we went to New York City one of the days. And then one of the other days too, I got to give him a shout out because he listens to the show, Tiernan Lau and his father, Mike. Tyler, you talk about people that are really inspirational and just kind of push you to do better, to do gooder, as we say out there. This Tiernan guy, he is 25 years old, produced his own album. Him and his dad did it. And you ask Alexa to play Tiernan Loud. That's his stage name, Tiernan Loud. She'll play the music. Very good distribution on it. And my dad and I, we played in a band for 8 years. We got to jam with these guys last week. And that was a really, really fun time. It made me realize how much I miss getting behind the throne of a drum set. And when you're really around talented people like we had when we were playing in a band, it really makes you want to do better. So we got to do that. And of course, if anybody knows me, I am a huge fan of the Cars. I grew up in the wrong era, that new wave 70s, 80s band, be my favorite band forever. Well, Rick Ocasek, or Ocasek is how it's pronounced. He passed away. He was the front man. He was the tall, lurch-looking guy, the black hair, the skinny guy with the guitar, sang half the songs. He died unexpectedly in 2019. And on the way to this jam session, we got to stop in Millbrook, New York, where his final resting place was. My dad and I got to pay respects to him and just kind of share a moment there, father and son. And I got a little choked up seeing that, Tyler, because Rick he would have never known me from anyone. But the influence somebody can have on you, you don't even know them. It's really, really phenomenal. And musical taste to trying to be a better musician. There's a lot I can learn from Rick Ocasek, and really cool to be at that final resting spot. So really a unique trip this past weekend. So kind of a long answer there, but certainly I know you're a music guy. You'd appreciate that. But really cool to do that jam session. Really cool to see Rick Ocase's final racing spot.
How many chords did you miss?
How many chords? Well, thankfully I'm not a guitarist, but a couple of times on the drums, I get really excited when you're playing with really good people. And let's say we're doing a cover. We did a few car songs. And are you familiar with the song Candy-O, Tyler?
No.
Okay, it's about a 2.5-minute song. It's a very fast-paced driven song out of the chord of E. And Kieran's to my left, my dad's to my right. They're both lead guitars, so they're swapping off on stuff. But on this song in particular, they're both nailing the solo pretty much note for note. And I'm one of those, like, I'm playing behind the drum set, and if I hear something that just catches my attention, I'm still playing the beat, but it catches me off guard. It, like, throws me off. I think I did miss a couple of key changes because of that. And so I didn't miss the chords myself, but really cool to see, like, these two different guitars, different sides of the country jamming for the first time, and they're in synchronicity with the solo. And anybody that's a Cars fan heard that song, it kind of sounds like a lift off. You're bending those strings towards the top of the neck. And it sounds kind of like you're either shifting through the gears or an airplane taking off. And they're hitting this perfect. And then that solo kind of has like a little Eddie Van Halen feel to it. And they're nailing that part too. So it's really cool stuff, man. As you can tell, I'm very passionate about music. If there's one more thing I'm passionate about more so than motorsports, it would be playing music.
All right. I like that. Glad you had a good time. Enjoyed yourself out there, Dom. That's good. What do you have for?
Yeah, so my question before the question you threw me, we'll take it back a little bit towards the show, but we'll be doing our next episode at mile marker 150. It's the 150th episode of Let's Go Racing. So I guess for you, Tyler, when we embarked on this, we started the show in the middle of the pandemic, and we've had tremendous guests throughout the years. Me and David have had a lot of fun doing the show. We've made some lifelong friends out of it. When you think on 150 shows, okay, where we've come, where we've started to where we're at, if somebody would have told you in December of 2020, you're going to have 150 shows under your belt on this, what do you think your expectations would have been at that time for 150 episodes? And fast forward to now, do you think those expectations have been met?
Man, they've been surpassed. And the thing I would say too is just how much our lives have changed in a short amount of time during this show. Dom, correct me if I'm wrong. You hadn't even met Felice yet when we started this show, right? Your wife?
Oh, correct. And yeah, one of those things when we started the show, we had a different president. When we started the show, I had not yet met my wife.
I lived
on my end of things, man.
And that's just for you. I lived in Kansas at the time, a month, and then so we started the show December 1st, and I accepted another job in Nebraska on what was it, December 15th or 16th, and I left beginning of January. So literally a month after this show started, I moved to Nebraska. And then a year after that, I moved to Texas. And I've been here now 2+ years since. David bought an entire racing school operation. And some of you may be wondering, like, hey, where's David when he's not here? Well, that's one thing that's changed a lot since we started the show is David is very swamped for his time when it comes to the racing school. And so when he's not here, it's usually related to the racing school, among things. And so he would love to be here when he can, but sometimes duty calls and he's got things to take care of there. But yeah, David bought a racing school. His boys have grown up. I remember, I'll be honest, when I first met the boys, I was annoyed. I thought DJ and Vancy were obnoxious as hell, and they've grown up and become good men of sorts. DJ's in high school and Vancy's in middle school, and now they're both getting to racing and everything. Like, they've matured a lot, and we've gotten to know Kim Starr great. I love Kim. She's like an aunt to me. She's been fantastic. Just everything about this. Like, I had no idea. The thing for me, not just the success of this show, of the product we put out every week, but everything else goes on. with this show with David and Dominic and all the friends we've met along the way. That to me is the rewarding part, and that's the biggest story to come of that, is just how far we've come in that sense compared to where we started this.
You bring up awesome points, Tyler. So true, because you always want to take on stuff that you feel like you can commit your time to, and you want to be passionate about it. And it's really cool that you have two co-hosts that are very passionate about the sport, just like myself, and that makes it so much easier when you want to do stuff like this. And yeah, of course, there's going to be hard days. There's going to be days where it feels like more work sometimes than it should. But you know what? That's going to be every job. That's going to be every position. How passionate are you about something? How bad do you want it? Like as David would say, David's really big on saying that. Well, how bad do you want it? And we have a great show here. We've been able to connect with a lot of people, a lot of great fans that email us or tell us they listen in on a weekly or frequent basis, or maybe they've only heard the show for the first time. But it's really cool to see how this show has just taken on its own identity, if you will, over the last few years. And gosh, honored to host it alongside you guys.
Yes, and we're honored that you guys make it happen. And it does take a lot of time doing this show. And I still do the Jones Report every week as well. Like to give inside baseball here, folks, I do this show on Tuesdays. I do the Jones Report on Wednesdays, and that's 2 of my 7 nights of the week already taken up before any of the other stuff that goes on. And it's all a part of the network that we have here at the Studio Soapbox Network. But you guys are worth it, and make it certainly worth our while to bring you this content each and every week to talk about what we love, to talk about NASCAR racing, to talk about motorsports. It's our pleasure to bring it to you. Dom, what's going on with you the next couple of days, my friend?
We'll be back in Grants, New Mexico, and having a really good weekend at home with the family. And yeah, really nice to be back home. I've been on the road a lot, not necessarily with NASCAR trips, but it's going to be nice to have a weekend back at the house, get things done around. And gosh, like I said at the beginning of the show, I will be living vicariously through you this weekend, because Tyler, you're having an awesome week. You were sharing with me a little bit before we came on tonight about what you're going to be doing. But yeah, share a little bit about this weekend, the itinerary, and I'm sure people are going to want to see you this weekend.
Yeah, cannot wait. Flying out Friday morning. Going to be enjoying myself all day Friday on Broadway. Meeting up with my friends Jonathan Hutton and Chad Withrow of Outkick there at their studio Friday, and certainly just having a good time doing that. And then I'll be at the race Sunday, and also making a visit out to Cookeville, Tennessee, home at Tennessee Tech, and meet up with my old boss and great friend Jonathan Monk and Freaky Dave and those guys out there. So yeah, it'll just be a great time, and reconnecting with folks and enjoying myself and having a nice few days off from work as well. It's always positive as well. So all is good on my front here. Certainly looking forward to the weekend. Dominic, we'll put the checkered flag out on this episode of Let's Go Racing with David Starr. New episodes out each and every week, Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and YouTube. Check us out wherever you're listening to podcasts. Also, follow us on social media, facebook.com/Starr Podcast, Twitter @Starr Podcast. And you can also email us, davidstarrpodcast@gmail.com is where you can find us there. Also, check out the Studio Soapbox Network. This show, the Jones Report, Coach Bono's podcast, and more on all podcast platforms. For Dominic Aragon, David Starr, I'm Tyler Jones. Thanks so long. It's been another edition of Let's Go Racing. We'll see you next week.